My man, Kahlil Dumas. Question for you. Where are you at right now in life? Like, what does your current life look like?
It's going really well. To quit corporate, and now I run a multi six figure business consulting, the host of the Unstuck podcast and the Unstuck platform. So really, just helping people redefine what generational wealth means to them, while helping them get unstuck.
Love it. Jesse Ray, Growth House Podcast. Man, I'm so excited to dive in. You might recognize this guy's face. He invited me on his podcast last year. Tables have turned, my man. Now I
Yeah,
get to interview you.
I love being on this side. Honestly, you got to do all the prep and all the hard work. I just got to answer your questions.
I know, right? So I always think it's so funny, like letting people in the inside. Like, how do we actually meet? How do we get connected? And then
Yeah,
really just I want to hear your story. So from your
yeah.
point of view, I always want to know, like, how do we get connected?
I felt like for a while we kind of missed each other a lot. And I, back way when in my early 20s, I was throwing parties like that. I was throwing events. Like I really wanted to network. And Jesse was the guy for that. He knew the right people, he had the events folks. And so we actually ended up partnering for an event called The Memo. And fast forward 10 years, we've been in constant communication, watching each other grow and grow these businesses out. So now it's just crazy to be telling our experience now. It's kind of wild. We feel like the old ones now.
You're not lying. And I'm like wondering what to share of that background.
Yeah. Oh
I
my
kind
God.
of
I know.
wanted this.
Literally. Go for it.
So all right, I was making sure we had the cosign from
Yeah.
you. So
Yeah.
so bro, I literally tell this story like when I talk about my older days, my younger days. I'm like, yeah, we
Yeah.
used to throw parties, Mansion, Westland, shout out Portland, shout out
Hell yeah.
Oregon, and
Shout out Lamarcus Aldridge's old mansion.
is that his old house?
Yes, his old house.
I didn't even know that. I lived there
Yeah.
for
That
like
was
an
a,
entire summer. I didn't even know that.
that's why there was a giant Portland Trailblazer court that we hosted it in. That was his custom court.
Bro, how did I never know that it was Lamarcus Aldridge? Like
Right? Crazy.
that's
I know it's
wild.
crazy. And Dame lived, I mean, Dame's gone now. He's in Milwaukee now, RIP
Mhm.
Dame. But, he lived close to there before he moved away. So yeah, that's like Portland Trailblazerville. So when
He
they
might
when
have
I
came
saw the
through a couple
location,
times.
oh, 100%.
But yeah, so I literally shared the story of like the parties they got kind of crazy, and
Just a little.
someone who threw this memo party ended up having like the SWAT team called on us.
Dude, okay, I want to just take several steps back. This party was crazy. Like we wanted to do something where we were
Oh,
maybe going to invite maybe 100 people. By the end of the time, like a couple days before the party, we had 3,000 people who were on this waiting list, and we could only fit like 300 people in. We had people calling us to pay like $500 to park their like custom cars outside the house. We had like celebrity agents contacting us. Like this got to a point where this was our first time throwing a party, and it was just something we were doing to end the summer out. It wasn't supposed to be this big thing, and by the end of it I'm like shoulder and shoulder with Jesse with like security earpieces in our ear, like we're running a full-fledged event. And I will tell you, that is the last event I ever threw.
yeah, you definitely, yeah, definitely knew how to draw a crowd. Especially, I think it was
Yeah,
mostly just like an IG party. I think that's what they called
yeah,
it back then. It was
yeah, it
like,
was. We did it. We shot a whole trailer. Like it turned into like a really big thing. But when I think back, like it really goes to like learning and knowing those marketing systems and like knowing how to draw attention. Like it was something that we both knew how to do really young.
hmm, man, wild times. All right, let's
Good
take a
times.
step even further back than that. So
Yeah.
before he was notorious for throwing this mansion party in Oregon, before he started his podcast, starting these consulting companies, becoming very successful, not just in business but in a lot of other aspects of life, which I want you to dive into. Like, walk me through what was that journey like? You can start from the
Yeah.
beginning, wherever you want the beginning to be.
The beginning starts in college. I actually was in that moment where I had a friend who, if you go and look up the Pop That French Montana music video, they have these like red hats with like the leather, with like these leopard print caps. My buddy Kevin ended up making $2 million off of that line just because it made it in the music video. And we're not friends anymore. So I'll say this outright. Like, I was like, if he can do that, why can't I do that? And
Yeah.
so I ended up that night conceptualizing a clothing brand. I was just like, I want to figure out how to do this. So I ended up creating a brand called Darkroom Collective, where we actually use cyanotype, which is like a printing process where you use natural sunlight to develop film onto clothing. And we ended up doing these runs, and my dorm room actually turned into like a shopping experience. So on the weekends, I would open my dorm room up and people would come shop in my dorm room. And so that was like the
Love that.
first kind of step into entrepreneurship. That's when like social people were like, we always joke, like when you see those old athlete posts on Instagram, when Instagram was like the old brown photo that people probably don't even remember. That was like my first stab at entrepreneurship. But where that really started from was watching my dad actually grow his business. He was always someone in my ear was like, don't work for anyone, don't work for anyone. And then my mom was like your quintessential corporate lawyer, where she, took a very traditional path. So I had these kind of two conflicting ideas of what I wanted to be and how I wanted it to be. And I ended up obviously going the entrepreneurial route. Now, that funny memo party that we started off with, the big reason why I did that was to actually promote my next endeavor. I opened up a retail store in downtown Portland. I really got into like cut and sew manufacturing. I'm sure many of you have heard of Portland Gear. I was one of their first interns. And so really the scene there was like learning from entrepreneurs, learning how marketing can inform and help grow your brand, help grow awareness. At that store, I think I had people like Meta World Peace. I had Dame Lillard. I had all sorts of people. I Love McConan come through that store. And it really just started to show me that, okay, this is actually what I want to do. It's really fun to see something from the ground floor, something no one's never heard about, to seeing it out in the world. And so that was kind of my like crash course in entrepreneurship. And I will kind of pause there because the story gets even more interesting from there.
So you're in college, you have the dorm room, aka a pop-up shop in there on the weekends.
Yeah.
And then you open up a retail store. Were you still in college? Did you get a corporate job and also do that on the side? What did that
So that
look
was,
like?
yeah. So I worked for a company called ASRV. I was their first hire. They're the competitor of Gymshark. I did that for about a year and a half. And I was like, I can do this on my own. So I actually ended up opening up like a modern day haberdashery called By the Collective downtown, where we basically cut hair and we also did cut and sew manufacturing. And so it was about 2 years outside of college, I find myself running a full-fledged business. I will tell you full stop, candidly, I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
Zero idea what I was doing. I had a dream and an idea and some support, and I thought that was going to be what retired me. But we know that that was not the case.
Okay, so keep going with the story because this is
Yeah. So,
like
yeah.
memory lane right now. The
Yeah.
collective.
No.
I
So,
knew so many people. I love going there.
So it was a great experience. It was a really awesome community building experience. I got to learn a lot about business. I got to learn a lot about what I didn't want to do. And what I didn't want to do is be in a physical location for most of the day, 6 days a week. That was not what I wanted to do. That is not how I wanted to live my life. I really wanted to be what we call today like a digital nomad, someone that could work remote. But remember, we're talking about 2015. Like remote work wasn't really something people were openly doing or talking about as they're doing today. So I actually had a really tough moment where I was only profiting like $800 a month at one point, and I was losing money running that. And I quickly had to think about, okay, if this continues for 5 years, is this sustainable? No.
Mm.
So I had this really starch moment where I had to take a step back and I had to restart, which wasn't easy. That was really, really a difficult moment for me because I had to admit failure. And I ended up actually going and getting a job at Nike, which a lot of people would be like, that was your fallback, going and working for Nike. At the
Right.
time, it felt like a failure.
Everyone wanted a job
Yeah,
at Nike. This is
everyone, yeah,
Oregon.
yeah,
Everyone trying to get a
everyone.
job.
Yeah, that's a great point. This is Oregon. Everyone wanted to get a job at
Mm-hmm.
Nike. But remember, I'm like wanting to be an entrepreneur. I think, okay, I'm in corporate world. I failed.
Mm.
And that couldn't have been further from the truth. I ended up working for Nike, and that was a great experience. I got to experience what it was like to work for the biggest brand in the world, the
Mm.
best marketing machine in the world. And this was a time when Colin Kaepernick was doing his thing, when Nike was in the spotlight. And my first job there, before I kind of moved up a little bit, actually one of the first kind of like initiation pieces that I had is I had to open up all the mail for Nike. So all the mail that got mailed into Nike, part of
What?
my analyst job was to open up the mail, because I worked within customer service, but I did data in customer service. And so that was my job. And so I got to open up all these letters from all these people. I mean, I remember this one letter where this lady ended up naming her kid Nike, and they sent in this whole thing about it. And I was like, this is insane how big of an impact a brand can have on so many people.
That's
how do
wild.
I do this? And so I kind of tabled
Were you
that.
supposed to open the letters and read them?
Oh yeah, you had open,
Oh, you're
scan it,
supposed.
read it. You had to. I
Oh
mean,
wow.
part of it was security. Like I had to make sure like nothing crazy was in there either.
Hmm.
Why I had that job again? It was kind of what the newbies got. That's kind of what you got at the very beginning. They kind of gave you that
Yeah.
role. Um, so from there, it was okay. I'm at Nike. I don't love this, but the
Mm.
thing about Nike is there are hundreds of businesses pitching themselves to Nike every single day, and I got to see that.
Wow.
Nike, the way it's set up is, campus. This is world headquarters. I got to remind you, this is the world headquarters. There's 13,000 people who work at world
Huge.
headquarters. It's massive.
Beautiful too.
And I got into what's called a stretch assignment. So at Nike, you can work your job and you can stretch into another role. So you
Mm.
can learn what that role is. And so I ended up stretching into what's called voice of the consumer. So I went from opening the mail to analyzing all of Nike's consumer data using Topbox, which was the startup I'll eventually get to when I joined. But so I went from opening the mail to analyzing all of the verbatims that people were saying online, on the website, through customer service. And I got to aggregate it, and I got to present to the 500 executives at Nike to show them, hey, this is what they're saying about your brand.
Wow.
And so this moment came where I was kind of over Nike. I'm not going to lie. I wasn't one to really drink the Kool-Aid. I knew what this was. I was a number. I wasn't making that much because Nike's Nike. They can hire whoever they want.
Hmm.
So one day I was having a hard day and I went outside and I remember I was getting some air and this guy Chris comes out and he looks dejected. You know, when you just see someone, you're like, "Are you okay?" Like, and the empath in me, I was like, "Let me check on this guy." So he's the CEO of Topbox, and he's like, "Yeah, we just pitched for an RFP and we didn't get it." And I was like, "Well, actually, I want to leave this place, and I heard your pitch, and I actually was the guy at Nike who's helping you get this data. I'd love to talk to you and see if there's a way we can maybe join forces so we can maybe retry this again." So
Hmm.
what we ended up doing was I actually got the biggest offer I've ever gotten at the time. At the time at Nike, I'll share, I was making 32,000 a year. I wasn't making anything. And this owner is like, I'll give you 120,000 to basically do the reporting that we wanted to do for Nike, but do it for all these other businesses. Those other
Hmm.
businesses turned out to be Sprint, turned out to be DoorDash, turned out to be Starbucks.
Wow.
So overnight, it felt like my life changed. And that was a story that I always tell with like that intention when I go back to the store. It was like I had that coming to Jesus moment. I failed, but that failure was not a failure. It was a lesson. It was a learning lesson. It
Hmm.
was, sometimes you need to take a step back. Sometimes you need to learn things. You need to learn skills, but sometimes you just need to have experiences. And you may not know what that experience is going to yield a year after the fact, 2 years after the fact. And so that's my favorite story that I tell from a progression of like, you can know what you want, but it might take the form of something else down the road. So you have to just be open to it and you have to believe in yourself. And I think that's the biggest thing, is to keep going and to believe in yourself. And we hear about that all the time.
Hmm.
But what I always get it right is like, believing in yourself doesn't pay my bills. Like I have to pay my bills. You can still go and do what you need to do, but just believe that it's going to happen for you.
That's amazing. Even just that story of you, like, not even right time, right place. 99% of those people that looked at him and be like, I got, stuff I got to deal with. I don't want to ask him what his problems are. I got my own
Yeah.
problems.
Right.
It's like, you
Right.
took you just out of love, like, hey, you good.
Yeah.
And that's what ended up happening. So I love that story. I did not know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's a great story, and it really launched my entrepreneurial life. I got to join Topbox. They ended up giving me a percentage of the company. That company ended up selling, and all of a sudden, I got my confidence. I said, "Okay, well, I helped
Mm.
scale that business from $3 to $12 million. They ended up
Hmm.
selling for about 50 million. And after I was able to cash out of that, I started to look around and say, "Okay, what else is out there?"
What year was
And
this and how old were you?
yeah, so this happened from about 2016 to 2021. That was in that time span of Nike, Topbox, and then Koros. Koros was actually the company that ended up purchasing us.
Hmm.
So I ended up actually running within a startup during the pandemic, which was its own set of challenges. I remember I lost 15% of my salary because we had to scale back, like the world shut down.
Mm.
But all those experiences led to where I'm at today. And I would say all of those experiences have built me to be ultra resilient. And I think that's one of the biggest learning lessons and just things that I've had to learn is resilience. I remember I had a wristband that it's still in my car actually to this day. It just says resilience, because
Mm.
that is what it takes to really do the things you want to do. You have to have that resilience. You have to have that belief in yourself. And I was always someone that was ultra curious, always asking questions. And in those little questions, I met founders, I got opportunities, and we'll talk about her first 100K and my transition out of there too. But that was definitely the first catalyst of like, okay, this is how this works. You acquire skill,
Mm-hmm.
but your skill is only going to get you so far. Your network is your net worth, and you've heard
Mm-hmm.
that, and it's so true.
So I want to ask you this question because this is something that I've thought back on. And I know a lot of people take the route that you do and say, hey, I know early on I got this entrepreneurial drive. I'm going to start my own business one day. But in the meantime, I want to work at startups because that's going to give me the skill sets and also the resilience, like you mentioned, to then once you start your own thing, you're like, I've done this before just for someone else. Now I get to do it for myself. I know, the pitfalls. I know all the learning lessons, so it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a failure. So what did you learn? Like one or two things that you take away from these startups that you were part of?
That the people and how you treat your people matters the absolute most.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the culture and those relationships are priceless. I'm still best friends with people from those startups. I still call them every week. Um, Now, if you ask the CEO, right, he's going to say my number two thing, which is having positive cash flow, because you can't do any of this without a viable business plan, without really understanding who your target audience is and really understanding how your product solves those problems. But starting off with the people and the culture, it's something that we hear as talking points that CEOs give all the time. But when you
Yeah.
actually look in their company, that's really not the truth, right? If you go ask an employee. So that is probably the biggest thing. That's something that I always make sure is in the front of my mind is, are my people seen? Are they heard? And do they have a clear career path within my organization, within my company? Because if all of those things don't work, yeah, you can still have a company, but it's not going to be very fun to run and operate and be within.
Mm-hmm. So this is just selfishly I want to know.
Yeah.
Culture, as I'm bringing on people and hiring people within Growth House, how did you how do you or how do you see other people develop and create culture the right way?
It all starts with you as the leader.
Mm.
And this gets as deep as you want it to get, but we'll go there. I think the
Yeah.
biggest thing is making sure as a founder, you are addressing and continuing to address your own traumas. Your own traumas will find its way into your organization if they're not solved. And what does that look like? What does that mean? Right. I'll give an anonymous example here. I have consulted with a founder that had a lot of childhood trauma. They ended up having parents that just didn't approve of what they were doing, and what I ended up seeing was that they would project that onto their staff. So when I went and talked with the staff, they never felt like they were good enough. They never felt like they had clear enough direction. They felt like they worked really hard for really little, and it was like a light bulb moment for me because I knew this founder, I knew this person. So I was like, oh, I can put one and one together here. They have
Mm-hmm.
unhealed trauma that's ultimately and and unfortunately was kind of a huge setback for them at some point in their business where people just left. And so that is a huge thing that I don't think a lot of people really think about, which is as a leader, how you show up is going to directly influence the culture and the business and the profitability of that business. Now, I know we know a lot of founders that aren't nice people. They aren't like the most good sheep. That's not the point. The point is
Mm-hmm.
making sure that you at least have other people in your organization that do have those skills. I have worked with other founders that don't check those boxes, but they've hired an executive team that do check those boxes. So
Mm-hmm.
it's something that's often forgotten about because, again, we go to what is your skills? What can you do? Oftentimes, the most friction is with people who have the most skills and feel like, right, they have the most impact. Therefore, they can act however they want to act, and that
Right.
is detrimental to culture. So that is the biggest thing to take inventory of. I know you really well. I know that
Mm-hmm.
you are always making sure people are seen. You are always checking in. You know, that is going to permeate through your culture. People are going to support
Mm-hmm.
each other. People are going to not be afraid to speak the truth. Like those things are really important to building a sustainable business.
Gosh, you got so much wisdom, man. Such an
You know, I'm
amazing
just
answer too.
thank you. I appreciate it.
I want to ask you, since you know a lot of startups, I've started working with a lot of startups myself on
Yeah.
our accelerator side through immersion.
Yeah.
But what do you
Love that
think is the
program.
percentage of people who are founders that actually are good leaders? And then how
Mm,
soon do you think someone who's a founder, and I think most founders realize that they're not good leaders at some point, and then they want to bring someone else on to, maybe be that CEO role.
yeah.
When should they? I guess it also depends, how fast they grow, etc. But more of a general
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. I would say less than 5% are good leaders.
Mm-hmm.
It's really rare. When you think about chance and think about probability, the probability of someone being ultra successful, having some cash, right? Because you're going to have that in order to start a business, but also being a people person, being able to check in, have that really high EQ, having brains and EQ is very rare.
Mm.
That doesn't mean that there aren't successful leaders that are good leaders. I'm saying great leaders, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think out in the ether, I think Gary Vee is probably one of the part of that 5%.
Mm.
I've gotten to not only work with Gary, but also people on his team. Like, it's no joke. It's one of the things I was just talking about before. If you go into that culture and you talk about and ask about Gary, people
Mm.
are going to be they're going to gush about him. Like,
Mm.
he challenges us, but also treats us like people. Um,
Mm.
the point at which you should bring someone in is definitely subjective, but most often it's at the point when the person feels like they're losing themselves to their business. It's that point when the business is running them. And what does that look like? That looks like when I wake up in the morning, I'm debilitated, I'm overwhelmed. That permeates throughout my day because I can't show up as my best self, most times, most days. That's the time to bring someone in like myself to say, okay, everything's gonna be okay, but let's prioritize what we're doing here. What we're doing here is we're trying to scale. We're trying to also build talent and retain talent. So what's getting in the way of that? And most of the time, what I see, what gets in the way of that is a tired leader.
I can go on and on about culture because it's something that, as you
Oh, it's
start,
huge.
it's so important. Like, obviously your
Yeah.
vision, I think, is first, and clarity and what exactly you're building. But then you can't do it by yourself.
Your from the audience that you're trying to sell to the culture you're trying to build. I think the most important thing is that uh, your vision is only as good as where you meet people,
Hmm.
where they actually are,
Mm-hmm.
internal and external.
Go deeper. Talk about that more.
Look at Elon Musk, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all love to talk about Elon. I
Yeah.
think Elon is a great visionary, not a good leader, great visionary. He has his inability to meet people where they are. He can't really do that.
Mm-hmm.
Literally in space. He can't meet you where you're at right here on Earth. He just can't.
Yeah.
But he hires the best people to do that. That's why he's
Mm-hmm.
everywhere, right? Like
Right.
that interview we saw a couple weeks ago where he literally said, "Go F yourself" to the CEO of Disney,
Disney, yeah.
right? Like he literally can't meet you where you're at as an audience because he's
Yeah.
up here talking to the people up here.
Yeah.
So like that is, I think, the biggest thing. That was one of the big aha moments I had years ago when someone said, "Your vision's only as good as where you can meet people," and actually convey that. And I was like, man. And he's like, if you can't do that, then find people who can. Like, damn.
Say that quote again.
Your vision is only as good as where you can meet people where they're at,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's internal or external,
Mm-hmm.
right? If I
You see
can't
that a
meet my
lot with
staff where
people.
they're at, I'm
Yeah.
going to fail. If I can't meet my target audience, my customers where they're at, I'm going to fail. Someone who's
Yeah.
really, really good at that is Jeff Bezos. Really good at that. Amazon. Returns suck. Getting access to things is hard. He
Mm-hmm.
solved all that. He met us where we were when we needed him most. That's the two leaders I love to compare because they're polar opposites when it comes to that quote.
I love that. All right. Go into your story more. So then you worked
Yeah.
at the Top Box and then a new startup?
Yeah. So Topbox sold to Koros. I went there for about a year. I actually ended up going to a company called Scarlet Health, which is a healthcare company. Talk about meeting people where they're at. This is me trying to test that hypothesis where Scarlet Health had this wonderful idea to basically make the emergency room your living room. Doctors and nurses come to your
Mm-hmm.
house. We covered
Mm-hmm.
99% of the US. But that was a tale and a lesson in that, like, big business is big business sometimes, and sometimes people stop great ideas just because they can. And
Mhm.
so from there, I was kind of left in a moment where I was like, I've done all this great work, but I haven't done it for myself yet,
Hmm.
and I don't know what it looks like yet. So in the process of all that, I launched Unstuck, which was a platform designed to help people get unstuck in their life, career, finances, and business, while also teaching them how to redefine generational wealth and build financial freedom. Because at the end of the day, that is where we all kind of get stuck, right? Like, we
Mhm.
want to have the financial freedom, but we also want to build something for the next generation. And in order to build for the next generation, you can't just make a lot of money. We saw that with our parents. Like, you can't just devote yourself to work. You have to have that other side, which is solving that generational trauma. That's kind of what we talked about with building good culture. So, like, that's been my big focus, is getting that platform as big as I can. So if you listen to the Unstuck podcast, if you go to unstuck.com, that's what we're doing. Also, at the same time, we have Unstuck Consulting, which is what all the things we're talking about today. So going and working with enterprises and CEOs to really help them define and redefine what success looks like for them in their own business, while also helping drive it.
Go deeper into what you're doing right now with the executive team, the CEOs,
Yeah.
and how do you even approach that? Because I mean, you're a new
Yeah.
startup. Would you
Yeah.
consider yourself a startup, a company? I know people kind of have some like labels that they don't want to
No,
use for their business.
I definitely would call it a startup for sure.
Yeah.
I have a team of about 3 people, so it's not
Hmm.
it's not anything huge, but we're able to make a lot of impact with that. We're actually
Yeah.
able to be really nimble and kind of outdo some of the bigger agencies that are kind of weighed down by, kind of how they've operated in the past. Um, Really just comes down to networking and having conversations like this. Actually, in about 2 hours, I'm going to a dinner full of leaders, right? So I'm going to go give a talk there. And it's really just learning how to show up as yourself. It's amazing when you're authentic and when you tell your given story, right? My story is different than your story, but
Hmm.
both of our stories have value and can attract different people. So aside from, right, utilizing TikTok, Instagram ads, using the algorithm, those are other ways I attract people. I have a newsletter. LinkedIn is great. Follow me on LinkedIn. Like, that's a huge
Hmm.
area where I'm able to have a lot of visibility.
Yeah, you're
But
super active on
just,
there. I love your content.
oh, thank you. Yeah, just all of those things. It's one big web that's connected.
Hmm.
And you have to kind of figure out, the game I'm playing right now is trying to figure out, like, how to balance all of this together while also, leaving room for Kahlil the individual to go touch grass and to go be in nature and to spend time with my family and to travel, right? So it's trying to figure this out. And what I've learned is that the clients and the people I work with align with all of that. It's really interesting how, when you hear about alignment, that's really, there's a lot of weight in that. How,
Hmm.
if you're doing the right things and you're showing up as the right person, you're gonna attract the people and the things that you want in your life.
Totally believe that. So no one just goes and starts this, consulting company. Obviously, there was some thought
Yeah.
into it. You were doing the
Yeah.
podcast for a little while. Walk me through
Yeah.
that transition, because in the growth house and in our community and people who are listening right now, they're kind of in
Yeah.
two boats for the most part. They're working a W-2 job. They're like, this
Mm.
sucks. I need to get out of the rat race. I want to go live a life of freedom, travel, maybe start my own business, etc. And so they're
Yeah.
looking to transition out. And there's people who are just starting, either a startup founder trying to raise capital, or as someone who just made that leap and it's like, hey, I'm all in on my business. I'm betting on myself. So what
Yeah.
was that journey for you, that transition?
Yeah, so much, and this is actual, I think, some of the frustration with kind of being in this space is, like, trying to communicate everything. You don't
Hmm.
have to, right? Like, I think you just, when you communicate what you want to do, it's okay if it comes in bits and pieces. For me, what it looked like was setting an intention and starting with creating a TikTok video. That was the first
Hmm.
thing I did. I can take you back to the pandemic, is right when I started creating content. It's really bad content,
So you're
but
working at a
content
corporate
nonetheless.
company. You're working at a
Yeah.
corporate company, and you're like, "Hey, I'm going to start doing this on the side, this podcast."
Yeah.
And potentially, did you know that you're going to do a consulting company,
I didn't
or
even
no?
know I was going to do a podcast. I didn't even know I was going to do a consulting company.
You just want to
Right
get
then
on
and there,
TikTok.
I just wanted to build. I just wanted to. I didn't know what TikTok was, but I thought, hey, like, this is really cool, and I don't know what it is, so I'm going to try it.
Yeah.
Um, I ended up going viral, and that was the moment when I was like, okay, there's 20,000 people here now. Maybe I should start a
Hmm.
podcast. Maybe they do want to hear what I have to say. So I started a podcast. again, this kind of jumps around a lot. Over the
Mhm.
last decade, I've had conversations, I've helped people build things because of just my curiosity. Like I just wanted to jump in and help Jesse. I wanted to help this person. And those people come back. They keep doing what they're doing and they come back. So one of the coolest stories is, I was kind of saving this, is I have an app called the One and One app. It's a habit forming app. And so from TikTok to the podcast, this opportunity came back. I was working with this guy, Thomas Drew, back at the store. I was making his clothes and helping him with his branding. And he
Mhm.
kept going and came back to me and was like, hey, I see you doing Unstuck. I see what you're doing over there. I see you're talking about people's, habits and financial habits. I want to build this app and I think you're the person I want to do it with.
Mm.
Like, okay, cool. Let's do it. And so yeah, you can check us out, the One on One app on the App Store. But where I was getting to is that person listening, like things are going to come and go, and opportunities are going to present themselves, and they're going to disappear. There were moments where I was open to receiving, and there were moments where I wasn't. And in this moment, I was open to receiving. And so
Mhm.
we're actually going through fundraising right now. We're going through all of that in a very hard environment. We're in our
Yeah.
pre-seed right now, trying to raise 2.5 million. But to the person listening to this who's, trying to get out of that rat race, what I want to say is it's entrepreneurship isn't always the answer either. As
Mhm.
much as I am an entrepreneur and I love this works for me. I have friends really happy, really successful who say this corporate job is the ideal for me because it gives me um, the ideal lifestyle, and it also gives me
Mhm.
stability.
Yeah.
That's okay. And I want to just say that because I've been there and I know that feeling like, oh, I'm just working a corporate job. Like you have to be grateful for that too.
Our corporate
Gratitude
jobs
is huge.
funded everything.
Right? I
Yeah.
remember when we were both coming up in corporate, and I remember having those parking lot conversations of like this is where I'm at right now, and
Yep.
this is going to help me get here. So really, I mentioned like my lessons, but one of the biggest pieces of advice, if you don't do anything else from this episode, is really focus on how you're grateful every day. And so this app, this
Mhm.
habit forming app, one of the big habits that I have is showing gratitude every day. It's gamified, so like when you do things you check it off. Like gratitude is something I check a box off every single day. And so that is definitely, not advice that people may feel like is going to make them money or is going to close that seed round, but in actuality it might, because it really adjusts your energy for the day. That is
Spot on.
huge. It's huge.
Spot on. Talk to me about how you show up like for yourself and like how do you express gratitude?
It differs on different days. Sometimes gratitude is doing something for my wife before she does it.
Mm.
Sometimes gratitude is saying like, man, shit's hard right now, but I'm really happy that I have a roof over my head and that I can pay my bills and I have friends that love me and family that loves me.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes it's in my journal. It's not even spoken, right? Like sometimes I'm just writing, like, I know like things are hard right now, but like this is all the things I have to be grateful for. Um, I also remember hearing this advice from people and being like, bullshit. Like, stop. That's not how that works. But it is. Because when I was in that energy, that's the energy I was putting out. Bullshit. Man, I'm not happy. Are you gonna want
Mhm.
to be around someone that has positive intent, or are you gonna want to be around someone that has negative intent? It's really
Mhm.
cut and dry. It goes down to our most core selves, survival. You're gonna want to be with someone who feels confident and is positive more than
Yeah.
someone who feels dejected and isn't. So we have our days. The message isn't to be positive all the time because life's hard. But in those hard moments, can you find something that you can be grateful and happy for to just get you through that? And that's priceless. I can't tell you, Jesse, how many times in my life I've had a hardship happen and I built that habit of like, okay, this is hard, but like these are all the good things I have. And
Mhm.
it really shifts my focus. It really helps me get through that week, that month, that year.
So good, man. So I don't know if you want to touch on it, but I actually learned about Tori from
Yeah.
you on LinkedIn. Do you want to kind of tell your kind of experience working with her and then going into,
Yes.
starting your own thing?
Yeah, that was one of those intentions that I had said a while ago when I was at the store. It was Thomas and Tori actually who I helped whiteboard their companies.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
Thomas T. Drew, someone that I just love like a brother. Like he's another black founder, so we have a black owned business now. It just aligned.
Mm,
I can't speak too much on the HFK situation, but I can say it just didn't align.
mhm,
And I recognize that like now is the time that I need to fully bet on myself, as hard as that can be, and feel
mhm,
right. Like stability is kind of what HFK was able to give me, but now I found stability in instability, and
mm.
it really blew the top off for me, because when you really sit down with all of it, right? Like you watch all these layoffs happen, you watch all this stuff happen. Like stability is an illusion. Like even down to, you take it outside of money, like we're spinning on a rock in the middle of infinite galaxies. What
Mhm.
the hell is stability?
Yeah.
It's just a mechanism to help us get through the next day, right? So that's
Mhm.
also just been something that I've been a little uncomfortable with, and I've been trying to work with. And I love that I have family and community to be able to actually help me with that. Um,
Let's talk about that
but
real quick because
yeah,
when you're going through that new phase, and so many people are there right now, I was there. I think I'm still sometimes there, where it's unstable as an entrepreneur, especially you starting a new business. It's up, it's down, it's down, 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 up a little bit,
yeah,
back down, and then up. It's like it's
yeah,
a roller
yeah,
coaster. Like it's
yeah,
crazy. And so what I truly believe is if you don't have a community, if you have no one you can talk to, we're already the minority. We're already the weird ones. Everyone else is looking at us. I surround myself with like people like you, so
yeah,
I forget how most people think. But 99% of the world looking at us like we're crazy. We're working all the time. We're have
yeah,
these crazy dreams that we're going to accomplish something, and we believe them 100%, but no one else
yeah,
probably does. And
yeah,
so if you don't have that community, if you don't have those people in your corner that you can talk to when you're about to quit, when you're going through the tough stuff that it's just like, is this even worth it?
yeah,
If you don't have that community, if you don't have someone else on the other side that has been there, you can look at you and say, Jesse, I was there last year. I know exactly what you're going through. Guess what? It's worth it, and you're going to make it through. You need
absolutely.
those
And
people
that's,
in your life.
it's so true. And I was laughing because I actually was just talking about this with a friend of mine, the ups and downs, right? I like to think in terms of like, well, let's think in terms of like a stock, right? Like
Mm,
stock goes up and down and up and down. But if you draw a trend line, the trend line's up. So even
yeah.
if you're in a down phase, you're higher than you were a year ago still.
Mm,
And it's something that you just have, that's just literally on my wall. It's literally on my wall right here, just that graph, because it's a great
no.
reminder in that there's going to be
So
peaks and
good.
valleys. You're not
Yes.
just going to have parabolic growth all the time. I think that's the biggest thing when I work with creators and startups, mainly the
Mm,
creator startups, is they're so used to virality and hyper growth that they don't know what it's like to be sustainable. They
yes.
think, "Oh my god, I'm in the valley, like everything's over." And they end up self-sabotaging and actually ending it. They actually end up like
Mhm.
hurting themselves instead of being like, "Hey, I'm actually so far ahead, and if I just give this 6 months, it's going to be okay." And so you unintendedly made a great point. Like that is what honestly one of the big three, other than my family, friends, and all that, keeps me going all the time. Is like my baseline is higher than it was last year. That's all that
Mhm.
matters. That's all that matters. And that's not even monetary, not always monetary. It's my growth. It's how I wake up each day. It's my sense
Mhm.
of self, my sense of confidence. Like those graphs, I have about 30 of them, right? Like that I'm watching go up and down, right? My
Yeah.
mood, like all of these things. So it's a great point, Jesse.
I think people also, as someone who's working in a corporate job right now, like we said, nothing wrong about that. If that's
Yeah.
something you need is stability, and let's say you have a family and you're, maybe later on in life, then it's probably a smart thing to do is to
Yeah.
stay, doing that, take care of the
Actually,
fam.
actually.
But if you are someone that has that desire to go take that leap, think about the worst outcome. The worst outcome is your current reality. What's going to happen if you fail? Guess what?
Yeah.
You can go back and get a job. Like it's,
Exactly. I say
I think
that
that's,
all
I
the
know,
time.
right?
And that's not a bad thing. Like
Not at
you
all.
have that, not everyone has that option, by the way.
Exactly. Especially, I mean, if you're someone ambitious, you're probably building skill sets outside of your job and you probably have more value than you even know. So let's say you go take that leap for whatever reason, you can't handle it, doesn't work. Hey, guess
Yeah.
what? You also now have that you have a lot of learning lessons during that time that you were, trying to start a business. You go back, you have a
100%.
whole skill set. You have a new bag that you could tap into with a
Yeah.
different company. So, no,
Absolutely.
something I just kind of thought of as we're talking.
Absolutely. That was a great point.
So how long have you currently been with this consulting company? I know we got a few more minutes.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, this goes back to my top box days. I mentioned I was in C suites consulting on data. I've been a consultant, what feels like most of my career.
Mhm.
But what I'm doing is being a fractional CMO, COO. Not everyone
Okay.
needs a full blown executive C suite. They just need that person to come in and like fix things or set up systems. And so I've been doing this for about a year now, like actual full time in that. And so I've worked with about 5 startups so far. It's been amazing. I've gotten to work across different industries, which has been great. And so just now I'm looking at, okay, a lot of the working capital is me. And so, how do I
Mhm.
continue to remove myself from my business so that it's not so dependent on me? But I'm
Mhm.
coming to soon realize like this is kind of my life's work. Like I love doing this. Like this is what podcasting and consulting is like what jazzes me up. I love teaching people and I love being taught because that's what they also I get taught too, which is amazing.
Love that. Also, we need to do a whole separate podcast just on podcasting because this is a new game for me.
Literally, let's
Like,
do
I
it. I'm
love to
down.
learn.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
podcasting is
All
a
right.
great networking tool. Like it's been awesome. It's
Super.
such a great networking tool.
Totally agree. Yeah, we'll have to do a separate one on that. So, last two questions. I know we got to wrap
Yeah.
up. I know you're a busy
Yeah.
man, so I appreciate you being on here.
Oh, and of course.
First, first question. Growth House is a go-giver community. We love to give back. We want to help support anyone who shows up for us. Obviously,
Yeah.
you're doing that right now. What are you looking for? How can we, connect with you? And then
Yeah.
also, who can we connect you to that you might want to be connected with?
Yeah, first and foremost, I'll drop you a link, unstuck.com. We'll give you the start here link. You can come book time with me, come talk with me, especially those startups and enterprises out there that want consulting in either the CMO or COO space. Also, for those of you listening, listen to the Unstuck podcast. Definitely go listen to Jesse and I's episode. It's awesome to kind of hear the flip side of this conversation here, Jesse, and not just me on my rants. So that's how you can support me right now.
I love that. Yes, we will drop all those links. Is there anything else you want to leave, the audience with? I mean, you dropped so much wisdom, so I don't even think I should let you have anything else to say. You had like 5 mic drops. My
Hey,
content team is going to chop up like 20 clips. I'm like, I guess we're using all of them. They're that good.
at the end of the day, show up for you first. Be
Mhm.
resilient, and really, really make sure that you're taking care of yourself and you're making sure you're taking care of your community. Because at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
We'll drop it right there, man. Jesse
Awesome.
Ray, Growth House Podcast. Appreciate you being here, brother. This has been amazing.
Thank you for having me.
All right, man. Take care.